Hi guys, this is Dormouse03,
And I'm Praetorian.
and this is a special Ramblings of Mad People where we're only going to talk about Life is Strange. So,
Indeed.
we both played the final episode about a week and a half ago.
Yeah,
At,
around that time.
yeah, at the time of this recording, it's been about a week and a half.
It was like
And,
as it came out.
yeah, and we just didn't have time to put this down until right now. But we wanted to do a special thing where we sort of do a little discussion, analysis, review type thing of that particular episode and of the game as a whole. And I think we're going to try to keep this beginning part where we talk sort of in general without spoilers, and then we'll let you know when we're going to take off the the reins of spoiler free and go all out. So
full spoiler beast mode.
Full spoiler beast mode indeed. So, Mr. Praetorian, what were your thoughts on episode 5 and sort of on the series overall, kind of in general?
I really enjoyed the series. I thought it was a nice premise and the mechanics worked well. Like all of your actions have consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't always change them. There isn't always like the ability to be able to change them. And episode 5 I thought was a good conclusion to the series. It was a little bit short in comparison with some of the other episodes, I think. But other than that, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes, I would agree. Overall, I thought it was a great game. Like, including all of the episodes, was a great series. I enjoyed the premise, like you said. I liked the whole rewind feature. I think that it played well. The characters were interesting, and it was a nice little story overall. And as far as episode 5 itself, I agree with you. I think it was a little bit short. And not just in comparison to the others, but I think it felt a little short for the finale. Like, it seemed like it needed a little bit more.
Yeah, it felt like it needed bulking out.
Yeah, but that's not to say that it wasn't good, because I think it was. I feel like it could have been better if some of the things had been a little bit more fleshed out. It had a little bit more of an epilogue, I think.
Yes.
Is what I really felt it needed.
Like the aftermath of your decisions needed to be sort of, I felt like they needed more detail and depth after the end.
Yes, I agree. And there are two major endings to the game. Yes. I don't think this is a spoiler. There are two major endings to the game, and they didn't really feel super balanced because one of them had kind of a longer fleshing out of it.
You got to see a bit more of what effect it had on people, whereas the other one seemed very much like, you chose this ending, it's done, you don't see anything.
Right.
Sort of.
Yeah, it was a little disappointing that one was, they just felt like they didn't balance the endings well. It was almost like they wanted the ending to be the one, but then they gave you the option for the other, but then they never really decided what they really wanted that to be or something. And I don't know. It just felt a little bit unbalanced to me.
And also when we were playing and you get the stats screen at the end, the two endings were very close. They were like 49 to 51%. So them fleshing out one ending and not the other ending didn't fit with how people had reacted to the game. It felt more like it was split halfway. I mean, it might have changed now because a lot more people have played it. So it might be worth hopping back on, or, one of us hopping back on and seeing whether it's skewed one way or the other now. But yeah, I would have preferred to have two equally fleshed out endings rather than one and then the other one being briefer.
Yeah, briefer, and it felt like less emotionally impacting.
It felt more detached.
It did. because there was, and we can't really say very much more about it than that without,
Yeah,
heading into spoiler territory.
5 minutes of non-spoilers has probably gone far
I
enough.
know. We've probably hit our limit of ability to talk about things without spoilers. But overall, I think it was a really good little game. For the money that you pay for it, you get a lot out of it. I felt you get a fair bit of mileage.
You do, yeah, and there's replayability in it as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, from this point onwards, there will be spoilers, so you have been warned.
You have been warned. Spoilers! There are spoilers!
We should put something like flashing on the screen.
I know, right? Spoilers now! So, story overall,
good.
Yes.
It felt like the whole of the story led up to the end point, and
Yes.
it fitted. It didn't feel like it had been tacked on or anything. It was like they'd written the whole thing to have those 2 endings. And the 2 endings were keep Chloe alive or sacrifice Chloe.
Right. And it was like you keep Chloe alive but sacrifice Arcadia Bay, because what had happened was the whole thing had led up to this tornado, hurricane.
Either or, doesn't matter.
One or the other.
A storm, a big storm.
A big storm with a vortex. That was destroying the town. And you find out that, as you predicted, sir,
I did.
That
the price to pay
Yes.
for Max's abilities and the changes she'd made to the timelines was that this storm would appear to rebalance. Like, to use... it was like a magic ability, sort of, and like magic always seems to have a price. And the price in this case...
According to Once Upon a Time, anyway.
Exactly. But it fits. It fits with this, so I'm going with that. It's like, it has a price to pay, and the price is either you sacrifice an entire town to save your friend, or you sacrifice your friend to save an entire town. But it's never that simple, because they're like your best friend.
/ love interest, possibly.
/ love interest. Yeah, like, in yours, she was.
Yes.
And in mine, she wasn't. And we did have slightly different endings because of that, which I thought was cool.
It was.
So, like in mine, she'll hug her, and in yours, they have a little smooch.
Well, in one of the endings, anyway.
Yeah, in the ending where you... Was that the one where you save her, they have the smooch?
No, it's the one where you sacrifice her, they have the kiss.
That was it, yeah. They had a hug in mine. I think it's because I went with Warren as her love interest for Max.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And probably, several other things, like I did the kiss with her before, and I think you didn't.
Yeah.
And maybe a couple of other random dialogue choices, but that's probably the major thing. So.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that person is really important to you. Whether it's your friend or, your more than friend. And for me, like, both choices made sense and were viable. I think,
Same for me as well.
A lot of people are like, how could you sacrifice an entire town just to save one person? Well, the whole business and the whole premise of the story is that you don't know what consequences things will have. And so you just have to make the best choice that you know how at the time that you can make it. And so it's like, is your best choice to go back, not use your powers at all, and then just hope that things play out in a way that will be more beneficial to the world? Or do you say, I've done the best I can to make the best choices over this entire story, and now I'm just going to say, okay, that's the best that I could do, and I'm not going to just do a total wipe,
Exactly. And it's
let
like,
things fall where they may.
In the ending with Chloe, where you keep her alive, you know that Jefferson and his whole story has come to an end, it's been dealt with. But if you sacrifice Chloe, you can't guarantee. I mean, it shows you that he gets arrested and so on and so forth. But from Max's point of view at that moment in time, she can't guarantee that anything will happen to Jefferson in that timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Because I guess we haven't talked about the mechanic yet. Like, she can go back in time with photos, but she can only go back in time to the specific moment that photo is taken and within the realm of that photo. So if it's a classroom photo, she can only remain in that classroom and affect decisions from there.
Right.
So, like...
And within a certain window of time.
Yeah. So it starts to, like... It starts to, like, overexpose.
Yeah.
And break down if she stays there, or it seems to if she stays there too long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it was when we were discussing the endings, you thought I'd sacrificed Chloe and mine.
I thought that you would have. I just thought you would have, but you didn't.
Well, my point of view with the ending was I couldn't guarantee that Jefferson would be dealt with in any other ending, so I chose the one where Chloe was alive. Mm-hmm. And also the fact we don't know who dies in the storm and who doesn't, because like you've said, with hurricanes and tornadoes, there's generally survivors.
Right, generally there's lots of survivors. I mean, this was a special case because generally with hurricanes and tornadoes you have some kind of warning that it's coming.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
I mean, well, with hurricanes you do, but with tornadoes you kind of don't. Like, they just happen. And
I guess
you
people
might
have shelters for tornadoes that they can get to, but Arcadia Bay maybe didn't because they hadn't had a tornado in a generation.
Sure. But, I mean, point being is when you look at, like, I'm just looking at the physical aftermath of what happened. So, like, if it had been a pit, I'm thinking, like, at the end, you probably don't know this reference, and other people might not, but it's like the end of the series Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The whole town... Spoilers for that, P.S. The whole town collapses in on itself, and it's this giant sinkhole of wreckage, like...
Wow. I mean, I watched some of the Buffy series, but I didn't realize that happened at the end.
Right. So, I mean, they had evacuated the town and whatnot, but point being, the town was freaking completely destroyed, total destruction. Anybody who did not get out of there was dead. Yeah. And it was obvious that that's the case. Like, that's not what this looked like. It wasn't total devastation. There were still things standing. Yes, there was wreckage and whatever, but a lot of people likely would have survived.
But it's also like the fact in America there are a lot of wooden-built houses, and wooden-built houses tend to get badly damaged in storm force winds anyway. But they don't, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's dead. It just means that your houses are very badly damaged.
Exactly. And if you're inside, like, where you should be, because, I mean, people know when it's in the storm, you want to get in a basement or some sort of underground if you can. If you can't do that, you want to get to, like, the center part of the building underneath a door frame or something where there's a lot of structure around you. And if people did that, it is very likely that I would say the majority of the town lived through that storm. Now, we know that some people would have died, but you don't know who. And that is the very problem with that ending, is that it doesn't show you.
It doesn't show the aftermath.
It doesn't show you the consequences
just shows
of that
some damaged
choice.
Buildings.
One person dead on the street.
And then they show them leaving.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit weird that they just leave when Chloe's parents, well, her mum may well still be alive.
And her stepdad may well still be alive too.
Yeah, it's like, well, like we were having the whole discussion about the timelines and stuff and which one's right and wrong and so on. We still couldn't come to a decision. So David could still be alive because he's in the bunker in at least one of the timelines. Room.
He would have been down there still gathering evidence and stuff, And
we also know that in one of the timelines that Joyce and Warren and Frank and Pompidou and one of the other guys are in the diner.
Mm-hmm.
And they seem relatively safe, although in that timeline it does explode.
Part
if
of it
Max
explodes.
Doesn't.
Yeah, if Max
Yeah.
doesn't stop the gas thing. But, I mean, we don't know because she wasn't there in the timeline that we're in now, so we have no idea what would have been going on or whether anybody would have warned anybody, because she changed things.
Exactly.
And so, I mean, that's the entire problem with that ending, is that it's not long enough, it's not fleshed out enough, and there's no emotional connection to it because you just see some of the buildings kind of just beat up and destroyed, and like one body dead on the ground. And that's it. It's like one random person too. It's not even like a person that you know.
It might be like the trucker or something.
Yeah. And it's like, and then they just drive off, and they don't even look. I mean, they look a little sad, but then they sort of like smile at each other, like a sad smile, kind of, and then drive off.
And then it's all forgotten, kind of.
And then they play which I did like. They played the music from the end of the first episode, so it's kind of like we've come full circle. But yeah, there was nothing that like was that emotional connection for that ending. Whereas the other ending, you sacrifice Chloe, you have that whole scene in the bathroom, which is just heartbreaking, where, Max just allows her to die. And then...
And I felt they did it really well with the photographs all changing. Like,
yes.
Showing them dancing on the bed, and then it changes to Jefferson being arrested, and then it changes from, like, Kate on the roof to like Nathan in prison, and that was kind of well done. And then you get to the end of that sort of montage, and it shows them going to the funeral, and the impact of that on like the sort of the friends of Chloe, I guess. Although like Warren and Kate are there, and I don't know whether they knew.
Right, yeah, it wasn't even like, it was like Chloe's, because Chloe didn't really have friends.
Unless they're there on Max's behalf.
I would imagine that they're
support.
there for Max as like support.
And then it kind of proved the theory that I had-ish, because the blue butterfly lands on her coffin, and I always thought of that as like Chloe's spirit animal.
Right, yeah, because it's
the series. Like her hair. And we also have like Rachel Amber's spirit animal is the doe that you see in the like I was gonna say graveyard, but it's not the graveyard, it's the junkyard.
Yeah. And Max has the like doe pendant
on her necklace when she finally gets back into her like own self on the cliff.
Yeah. And and both of them see. Now, this is why I do like the endings. I do have the problem that the one, I think, is not as balanced as the other, and they should have had more aftermath for the one where Chloe lives.
Yes.
I wholeheartedly believe that. But for both of these endings, they are a good ending for the series, and both of them are logical conclusions of what could have happened.
Yeah.
And it's a way to do both of them are ways to do, like, if you want to have a bittersweet ending, which is I think what the whole thing was going for, was having this tone of you have to grow up, you have to make, choices that you may not have a good choice, you can't fix everything, you can't save everyone, you can't do everything right, sometimes there is no right answer. Is kind of some of the themes that were woven through this whole thing.
And also the theme of the thing is Chloe is meant to die. Like, the universe is kind of conspiring against her because you see her die at least 5, maybe 6, maybe more times during the plot.
Right.
So it's like, I think it's very much, or the way I took it, is that one of the ending is like you choosing your own fate, and the other one is you going with what fate has decided.
Right,
like
giving in to that.
which which mindset are you part of, sort of.
Yeah, like, are you going to continue to fight something that
Fight fate.
seems what is destined to be, or are you going to just say, this is what was meant to happen and we have to let it happen because we have to? And so, yeah, and both of those, and not that one mindset is better than the other. I think they're both,
No,
again,
they're just
viable.
equally
options.
viable, just different viewpoints on a decision.
And on sort of life in general. So I was talking about like the bittersweet thing. So
You
like
were.
a lot of games and movies and like a lot of media in general try to do the bittersweet ending thing. And I'm going to make a Mass Effect 3 reference because by God, I can't let that game die.
I knew it was coming as well.
I know you did. But it's like that's what they were trying to do with Mass Effect 3 was have bittersweet endings. And what they ended up doing was it just came out very forced. Whereas
It
with
was
this,
tacked on.
it was tacked on. It was not done well. It was like because the whole thing didn't lead up to it. And
Exactly.
your point with, Chloe dying and or, sacrificing the town or, some people that we don't know who they are in the town for her to be able to live was led up to and foreshadowed, and the entire freaking thing led up to that.
Yeah,
This
it's
entire thing has been about saving Chloe.
And it's like we know from the start that there's going to be a storm.
Exactly.
And it's like all roads are leading to that.
Right.
So like no matter what choices you make during that game, you will get to the point where there is a storm and you will have to make that decision.
Exactly. And with like Mass Effect 3, it was tacked on because the entire series did not lead to that. It didn't lead to the part at the end where then it just felt very contrived. Whereas with this, it felt very natural that you ended up where you did, and then you had the choice that you did.
Yes.
And it made sense with the tone of the entire rest of the episodes that it was going to end up that way because, and on the whole theme of, growing up and coming of age and that kind of thing, part of that maturing process is learning that things are real and have real consequences. And you started off in episode 1 with Max and Chloe being very like a little childish, and she used her abilities to affect very minimal things.
Yeah, it's like
well, I mean, except for saving Chloe's life in the bathroom, that was pretty major. But
yeah, it's like trying to prove to Chloe that she had powers, and she does the "what have I got in my pockets" game, and then like predicts what people are going to do in the cafe.
right, and they're like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And then the next episode, they're playing in the junkyard and just screwing around and whatever, and it gets progressively more and more serious as it goes through.
Yeah, like she has to save Chloe again from the train because she's got her foot stuck. So it's like it feels like from that point onwards, it gets a more serious tone into it. Like
I would say from the point where Kate is on the building, like that's the moment where it starts to get a little bit more serious.
Well, is the junkyard in episode 2 or episode 3?
I want to say the junkyard is in episode 3.
Okay, so it's after she saved Kate, because isn't Kate episode 2?
I believe Kate is the end of episode 2. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Then yeah, from Kate onwards it is, because I was thinking that the junkyard was before Kate for some reason.
Well, and it's not a straight progression.
No.
It's like they have a little bit of like fun bits in each episode. So they have some lighter moments, but it gets progressively darker, and like I don't know that there's any fun stuff in episode 4 or 5. Like all of that is serious business.
Mm-hmm.
So, it has that natural progression, and from the very beginning you see that like this isn't going to be something where everybody's going to come out and there's puppies and kittens and rainbows and you're going to have that ending. It just never felt that way.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think because I don't know, a glutton for punishment, I guess. I've looked at like people's reactions to it, because I always like to do that kind of after I watch something or play something, like see what other people think. And I feel like people were upset about that final choice, and like, why weren't there more choices? Why wasn't there a choice where everybody could live?
Because we don't live in an ideal world, and that was the whole point in the story, was there was always going to be consequences to your actions. And it's like,
Right.
I'm glad that they made it so you couldn't save Rachel Amber in any of the endings.
Right.
Because that was like a point in time that was outside of Max's control.
Yes.
And it would have made it so that they were changing her abilities to interact with a time that she isn't part of.
Mm-hmm.
Like being able to go back with the photos and such. And I also, not entirely sure where I was going to go with that. Just kind of lost it, but never mind. It'll probably pop back somewhere later in the conversation.
It's okay. So, and there's also the argument to be made. What did you think of?
Oh, I know what I was going to say.
Go for it.
The number of endings. It made sense for there to be 2, because there's always been choices. The major choices in the game have always had A or B. They've never had A, B, C, or D, or A, B, C.
Right.
It's always been 2. And it kind of fits with the whole thing that there was a choice between 1 or 2 endings. Because everything, like, you could save Kate, or you couldn't save Kate, or you could steal the money, or you couldn't steal the money. It's like the major ones always
were
seem to
dichotomous.
they were a dichotomy. So it made sense. I'm also glad that they didn't make it so Max died at the end.
Me too. Although I thought that might be happening.
I think maybe if she continues to use her powers, she might.
Yeah. Because, like, poor girl was falling apart there at the end. Just psychologically, physically, everything. Which makes sense. I mean, that's a huge
and that
thing
leads,
for you to do,
That leads well into talking about the nightmare sequence. Because that is like her mind fracturing, and her kind of trying to find herself within her own broken psyche, kind of.
Yeah, because you have to imagine it's got to be hard to like hold all of those alternate realities in your mind at once.
And which ones are still like having an effect on the future or the present that you're in, and which ones aren't and are defunct, but you've experienced them all. So it's like, oh god, so this one doesn't exist anymore because I changed it and went back, but that means that this one is now something. So it's like, you can see why she's harboring several different versions of herself within one body.
Right. Or not even versions of herself, but versions of the world state. It's crazy. So
it's complicated.
It is
that's
complicated.
The problem with trying to work out which timelines are still true and which aren't.
Right. Because, like, which thing, like, would David be in the bunker still? Maybe, maybe not. It's unclear.
We need to do some, like, giant diagram of, like, a tree diagram of all the different branch-off points and which ones didn't work and which ones do. Like, which ones she changes and which ones she doesn't. I thought the nightmare sequence was good, but I felt it was too long. But I guess that's in the context of the episode being short, is that the nightmare sequence felt like it was a third of the episode.
Yes. And like, the nightmare sequence was fine. The bit where you were running away from the people with the flashlights, like, I didn't understand what was happening there, and it was hard for my brain to sort of map out where they were at first, like, where I was supposed to go. It was just a little confusing because that was a thing that you'd never really had to do before, except I guess there were a couple of other parts where
you had to do it in the swimming pool.
Yeah, in the swimming pool, the lockers.
Arrived.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether they were trying to say, like, Max was trying to enter a power, like a portion of her mind that she wasn't supposed to be getting into.
Right.
Like, her body was trying to stop her, and that's why the flashlights were there as a metaphor of, you shouldn't really be trying this, why are you here?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I think the nightmare sequence, I think, was fine for me. I think, like you said, in the context of how short the episode was as a whole, it took up too much of it. And there was a lot of rehashing of stuff that you'd done before, which I understand. Like, I think that was totally fine to have in there. I just wish that there had been more, and the more that I wish that there had been is an epilogue at the end.
Yeah.
You know.
Exactly. It's like, maybe if they'd have, made the nightmare sequence a little shorter and concise, and then had more time to, do the epilogue sequence fleshed out a bit more. I would have happily waited another month for the game if they'd have fleshed out the epilogue sequence.
Absolutely. Or, paid another $5 and had another episode or something. Yeah. So, but, yeah, I don't know. The nightmare sequence, again, I think it was fine, but overall the episode felt short, and if they could have cut something, it definitely could have lost some of that sequence to, have a little bit more fleshed out endings. So, I had a thought earlier about the end, and I'm trying to remember what it was. It'll come to me.
Is it possibly to do with, would Max still have her powers if she never used them the first time? Because, like, in the bathroom is the first time that she uses her powers. And she, like, goes back to the point before she uses them. And it's like, she only gets her powers once Chloe's shot.
It was like that was the catalyst that caused them to happen. Yeah, the thought wasn't about that, but we can talk about this. About, like, I wish that there had been more explanation of how, like, why her powers existed.
Yeah. Like, had she always had them and just not tapped into them? Or were they turned on by Chloe?
Right.
Like, that raw emotion of, oh God, someone's been killed and I want to change it.
Right. Yeah. Because, I mean, she didn't even know it was Chloe at the time.
No, she didn't. She was just like, that someone's been shot.
Reaction. Yeah. And so, I don't know. I wish that there had been more about that. Like, where did these powers... Because it kept, like, hinting at this, like, spiritual aspect of, like, the Native Americans.
And also, like, the janitor guy seemed quite in touch with nature and the squirrels, and he said there was, like, change on the way. Squirrels.
That big squirrel outside in the nightmare sequence was just amazing. Anyway, it seemed like that was going somewhere, and it felt like a plot thread that just got dropped.
Yeah.
And that was a little disappointing.
We've kind of
I know exactly what it was. So, cool. The choices that you made and the whole, like, retconning of all the choices, I think there was a bit of... I had a bit of a feeling of this, and I know that a lot of people had a problem with this about the last episode, was that none of your choices mattered. is the argument to be made of like, well, none of my choices really made any difference because either I saved Chloe and, the whole town is dead, so what was the point of, saving all these people in all these timelines and like, keeping Alyssa from getting her head hit by the football? What's the point of that if everybody's just gonna die? And then the other, the flip side of that, like if you go back and change it to where Max doesn't have her abilities anymore at all, like what was the entire point of the stuff if like you don't do any of those things? But I disagree with that because the point is that Max knows.
Yeah. It's like
what happened.
It's Max's coming of age story.
Right, and it's less to do with everyone else.
She's had the experience of having to deal with Kate, and she's had the experience of having to deal with Chloe and Jefferson. They're all still facets of her life. And it does make a difference because it all led up to the point. I guess we all have the choices of making the decisions at the end. And it's not dependent on, what decisions we have made. So I can see the point of view of them saying that it doesn't matter. But it matters to Max.
Right.
Like,
and it
she
matters,
still knows.
Yeah, and it matters, like, what kind of person you are, because, I think the whole thing is a metaphor, again, for coming of age, and it's a metaphor for life in general. There's life is in the title of the thing. Go ahead.
I think what I mean is, we may all reach the same destination point, but it's the journey that counts. It's how we get there. It's like saying that we went from point A to point B. Yeah, we went from point A to point B, but you may have taken a completely different route to get there, had different experiences, and not be the same person as I am when we reach that point, because we acted and behaved differently and were given different choices. And I know for a fact that you and I made different decisions through the playthrough.
Oh, yeah.
And our Max is slightly, our Max is an alternative universe to each other, Max. So
right. And it shapes your general experience and your personality. The choices that you make or don't make through your life, it doesn't matter, like, whether you ultimately get to because, we're all going to ultimately, like, die.
Yeah,
at the end of our life,
it's
going to come to that end point. And who knows whether or not that end point will be the same depending on whatever choices you made throughout your life. But the point being is that just because you reach that end point doesn't mean that nothing in between matters,
Exactly.
And I think they hinted at that theme, and I guess people didn't really pick up on it. But I did. The whole line that Chloe had about, these experiences were real, regardless of the timeline, and regardless of whether or not you go back and make it so that they never technically happened. The experiences
She's like, you
were
gave
real.
me one hell of a send-off. We had one of the best weeks of my life, or the best week of my life, and if that means I have to die to save the town, you'll still remember me.
Yeah.
From our time together.
And so I don't get the whole argument about like, oh, none of my choices mattered and whatever, and it's like they didn't matter in any way where, you go through an epilogue and it's like, and this character's life turned out this way, and this character's life turned out this way, and and then, Pompidou rode off into the sunset because in this one you didn't kill him because you were an ass. Like
it's not like one of those epilogues where it mandatorily fills in
all the gaps
so
of
that
every
you don't
single
have
choice.
any choice or headcanon at the end if they don't make another Life is Strange.
Right.
Which they probably won't, because
No.
it feels like it's concluded.
It
I mean, I'd
does.
like to see something similar in the future.
Yeah.
I think that game mechanic works really well.
They said that if they make another Life is... Because people have asked, because it was been quite successful, which I'm glad for, because it seems like one of those games that, like, wouldn't catch on, really, but it seems like it kind of has.
Yeah, I know a fair few people on my friends list have played it and completed it.
Yeah.
Which goes well for episodic games, because some people play like the first one and then not carry
stop.
on.
Yeah. And so they've said that if they do make another one, it will likely not be with the same characters, which I would be totally fine with. That would make absolute sense.
Yeah, and maybe have slightly different powers.
Yeah, or maybe explain more about where the powers come from. They could do that in another one, which would be cool. That doesn't excuse the fact that they didn't do them in this one, because I felt like it really did need that, but...
The problem is that people would complain if they'd explain the powers in a way that they didn't like.
That's
so I think
true.
that's probably why they left it more open for people's interpretations, so that they can have, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. We can have a discussion about what you think about it. And yeah, it's kind of like... I'm going to use Mass Effect as an example. I would have much preferred not to know the Reaper's origin story.
Me too.
If it meant that we didn't need the catalyst.
Right, if it meant that it wasn't some contrived thing that felt...
Exactly.
Silly.
It'd be like, yeah, Max got her powers because there's a totem pole in the garden. Okay. I guess that might
Right.
work.
Or because there were these creatures or something that decided, like, to test her and give her these abilities for a moment in time or something.
It was aliens, or, Star Wars and its midi-chlorians for the Force.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you, like, no explanation is better than a bad explanation, and so it's possible that they really just couldn't think of something that could be written in there in a satisfactory way, and so they just didn't do it, which is preferable, absolutely, to something bad.
Here's a question for you. Did you see Jefferson as the main villain the entire way through?
No, I didn't. I didn't like him from the start, because I thought he was a just jerk who was up his own ass.
Hipster douchebag.
He was a hipster douchebag who was arrogant and just all about himself.
And he seemed a little bit too flirty with his students.
He did, and I hated... He was just one of those people that's just an asshole, and everybody loves them, and it just boggles my mind, and I hate it.
I know.
And
We've had this conversation many times.
Yeah,
and it's just like, it just doesn't make sense.
Why do the people who are the assholes, people always like them? I do not understand that. It blows my mind.
Turns out that maybe a lot of people are assholes, so they congregate with other assholes.
It's possible.
Yeah.
But
No. Most people I've met are actually fine, upstanding individuals.
Yes.
But
I don't know. Like, no, I did not predict that it would be him who was the serial killer.
Because you felt like with the Rachel Amber storyline that there was some sort of serial killer or abductee or something along those lines.
Right.
And it kind of pushes you towards Nathan.
It does, but
I kind
the whole
of felt
time
like
I knew
Nathan's
it wasn't him.
like a pawn, or
He was.
Being blackmailed or whatever by someone, and it felt kind of implied that it was his dad, and I was like, nah, it's not his dad. It's got to be someone else.
Yeah.
I don't know why I had the feeling that it had to be someone else, but
no, I had that feeling too. It was like, because it felt too obvious. It was like, oh well, Nathan's too obvious. Oh well, Nathan's dad is too obvious. Oh, David's too obvious.
I was like, David will come good in the end.
Yeah, I predicted that too. David,
David's an absolute legend.
David was amazing.
Because
But
we've kind of talked about the last episode backwards. So we started at the end, and then we did the nightmare sequence, and now we're on Jefferson.
yes.
So in your game,
we rewound.
we did a max. We went backwards through our timeline.
Mm-hmm.
In your version of events, did Jefferson get his just desserts?
Oh yeah, you mean did David kill him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
bullet
yeah.
to the brain.
Oh yes,
So
happened.
satisfying.
It was very good.
But I felt
very
sorry
good.
for David because he did love Chloe, even though she couldn't see it at all. She's like, no, he hates me. It's like he felt like he was a bit emotionally hardened because he was a soldier and found it difficult to interact with people in a way that they would understand. Like his whole surveillance thing was to protect people, but he went beyond like normal boundaries to try and keep them safe. But that ended up saving people in the end because, you know, he has all the information about like Nathan and his drug dealings and such, so that when Max sends him the message, he knows exactly what he needs to do and where he needs to go. So he's like vindicated for being a bit obsessed, which was nice.
It was. No, I liked David, and I don't know. I think Jefferson deserved to die. He just did.
Well, and after he'd killed Rachel Amber.
Well, Nathan did that.
Yeah, but I feel like...
But Jefferson is ultimately responsible.
He is ultimately responsible because he's guiding Nathan down the path of drugging young girls and taking their photographs while they're inebriated / what did he say? Like unsullied, innocent, and the move from innocent to whatever the hell he was looking for. Innocent... Well, it's not guilty as such, but...
It was like Innocence Lost or something like that. Yeah. It was dumb. Like, that whole thing was dumb. But, I mean, not that it was a dumb plot-wise, because, you know, it made sense.
It was a good plot point, and it was a good plot for his personality.
Right. It was just it makes no sense. Well, because he's insane. He's a crazy person, and he's a psychopath. Make sense. Yeah. Like, that doesn't make sense. The whole, like, oh, I'm going to take their picture, you know, as their innocence is like, really?
What it felt like was he was the psychopath, and then Nathan was the sociopath, who was, like, on his way to becoming a psychopath.
Right, if he had continued with him for, you know, very much longer. But it also felt like Nathan was redeemable.
He was redeemable because he did phone Max and say, look,
and warn her,
Jefferson's coming for me. He's going to come for you. You need to, like, hide or whatever. So he tried at the very end, at least.
He did try. Now, that does not make up for everything that he'd done, and it does not mean that I was sad that he died.
No.
Or think that he shouldn't
go
to prison. Like, I think that's absolutely appropriate.
He had at least... like one redeemable quality, whereas Jefferson had none.
Exactly.
Like there may be some very small nugget of hope for him, but Jefferson was just the abyss at this point. He was just gone.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that after many, many years of, you know, therapy and prison time, Nathan could have been someone who was able to be at least maybe not redeemed, but repurposed or
yeah, I know what you mean. Sort of like to be able to become a pseudo part of society, maybe.
Yeah.
Or at least not in like some like high security prison, but maybe a lower one, kind of.
Yeah. Like,
but he's still a murderer at the end of the day.
Oh yeah,
and
like he is still a murderer. And regardless of whether he needed psychological help, he knew the consequences of what he was doing. He would not meet the definition for legal insanity, and therefore he would go to prison. That's where people go when they commit crimes like that.
And he may even go on death row depending on what state he's in.
Exactly. I mean, it was a young girl that was killed because of him. So, you know.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. I don't know. I don't get, there's also this whole, like, outpouring of love for Nathan, and, like, why didn't he get the help that he deserved, and, like, that he deserved.
He did get what he deserved. No, he got what he deserved.
Exactly. He did get what he deserved. He's either in prison or he's dead. And both of those things he deserves
because
for what he's done.
His personality is the thing that makes him do those kind of things. So you could save his life, but you wouldn't be able to change who he is without therapy, prison, like you said before. And people thinking that he can be redeemed, you know, like, oh, he only killed Rachel Amber, so it's fine because, you know, he's whatever. He's an asshole, but everyone likes him.
Because he's young, right? Like, you know, yeah, he was, what, 17 or 18?
Yeah.
And at that point, you understand the consequences of what you're doing.
I mean, I understood the consequences of my actions way before I was 17.
Yeah, absolutely. And to say that, like, well, you shouldn't get punished as much because you're young and, you know, because he was being manipulated, there you go, by someone who was older and crazy, it's not an excuse. You know, it's an explanation, and it makes sense, and it gives him a little bit of that, like we said, hope that he could change and become a better person. And you can also
understand his position a little bit better.
Yeah.
There's no way to understand Jefferson's.
Right. You can definitely... Nathan is relatable in a way that Jefferson is not.
He's more human.
Yeah.
He at least has some form of compassion somewhere buried deep inside him.
Right.
Whereas Jefferson is very much... But Jefferson is very much evil.
He is.
And that's it. He's just evil.
He's pure evil, whereas Nathan has done bad things, but is not ultimately an evil person.
Yeah, he's like got 70% evil in him and 30% maybe.
I mean, he's
redeemable.
leaning toward the dark side, but you know, not leaning toward. He's in the dark side. He's in the dark room.
It's the Emperor and it's
Vader.
The Emperor and Vader and Nathan's Vader, where he has some redeemable quality somewhere.
Right, but Vader still dies.
Yeah, and Vader still pays for his...
And he deserved it, you know? And Vader was much better than Nathan.
Oh, Vader was so much better than Nathan, at the end. We're not talking about episode 1, 2, or 3 Vader, because he's a dipshit, but we're talking...
Right, we're talking about the real Vader.
We're talking about real Vader. Like, the original 3 films.
Yes, exactly.
His kind of redemption.
Yes.
At the end, for Luke.
Yeah, it's like that, and it's like that could have been possible, I think, for Nathan. Like, he could have come back and done good, but that doesn't mean that excuses everything that he has done, and that he needs to, you know, that basically we need to say, oh, well, wipe the slate clean.
Mm-hmm.
You can do better.
I also wondered at one point whether Nathan was going to end up killing Jefferson.
Right, that would have been nice.
You know, and then maybe, you know, handing himself in or taking his own life or whatever, depending on what decisions you made with him.
Right. Whether or not you treated him like he was an irredeemable jerk, or whether or not you empathized with him. Yeah, that would have been interesting. But, I mean, you know that he did turn him in the
alternate
version
the version
where
where
Chloe
Chloe's
dies.
death is canon.
Because that's how they would have caught Jefferson.
Yeah, because Nathan gets arrested for murder.
Yes.
But really, in that one, he's murdered twice. Because he killed Rachel and he killed Chloe, so I guess there probably isn't any case for him to be let out anytime ever.
Oh, no. Like, he would be... I mean, that's 2 murders. That's at least 50 years. in prison. And so, you serve for violent crimes. I think you have to serve at least 2/3 of the time for that.
So that's 33.
And so, yeah, that's like at least 33 years. So he could be potentially like in his 50s by the time he got out of prison. It's possible. And it's possible that, he could be a better person after that. But, given the state of prisons in the U.S., like, there are people who go to prison and, change for the better and whatnot. But prison is far more about containment than it is about rehabilitation.
It is. It's about moving unnecessaries from society.
Yeah, it is.
So that they don't hurt other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the whole, like, quality of life thing, basically, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like they are still humans, so they have rights, but they have the right to remain in prison, basically.
Yeah, they have a lot of their rights, stripped from them because they have done something to deserve the taking away of those things. So, yeah. I don't know. I mean, that's a debate that delves into farther territory than what this game is about. But
well, the point being is this is rambling, so we ended up into the area of rambling about prison and psychology.
So I don't know. Point being, Nathan got what he deserved either way. Whether he was dead or whether he was going to be in prison for basically the rest of his life. That's where that ending was where he deserved to be. It just is. So
I think all in all, a very good series.
Yes.
And I would look forward to something similar in the future, but I wouldn't want Max to make a return. I think her storyline is done.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're considering doing something similar but not having the exact same characters.
Right. Like, if I saw anything from it, I would want it to be in sort of maybe like novel form or graphic novel form or something like that could continue like her story or whatever after what happened. Because again, like, I think I am left wanting more of that world, especially with the ending that I chose, where she saves Chloe, because it feels like it just didn't get the closure that it needed. And and even in the other one where she sacrificed Chloe, it would have been nice to kind of see a little bit further on how those things affected her life.
Yeah, like whether she chose a different direction, like she didn't do photography and went and did something else, or she moved away, or whether she's like with Warren, if you chose that for her.
Or, whether she moves back with her parents or what she does, when she goes to college. And it would have been nice to have seen, and it would have been fine to just do photo form, like they had done throughout, of, what happens throughout her life.
Whether she kept the photo of the bucket and the butterfly, because I don't know whether we see her tear that apart.
I think she does.
I thought she did, but I couldn't remember whether she did or not.
She does. I think she does in both of them, because she tears it up. I know she tears it up if you choose to save Chloe, because she's like, no.
Yeah, I know that. But I couldn't remember
that.
Whether she's like crying and then she tears it up.
I think she tears it up in the bathroom, yeah. Okay. Because it's like that's her way of making sure that choice is permanent. So, is destroying the photos. But in that timeline, she would still have her like photo album. And so if at some point in the future
there might be a photo of her taking all her photos out of the album. Like in that timeline, she's like sat on the floor.
Oh yeah, and
so she might be taking them all out and burning them or tearing them up. So I guess that's that answered for me. She does tear it up. So.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember them 100%, but yeah. Like, but to think of like, are all the pictures of herself gone? You know, because, and if she does tear up all of those pictures in that timeline, that kind of leads you to believe that she does still have her powers and could
Yes.
potentially use them, because she wouldn't need to tear them up if she didn't.
What she could also do is, if she wants to be with Chloe again, at least for a little while, is use one of the photos to go back but not change anything. And just
Right.
talk to her and be with her, and then she'd have to go back. Which would be
Into the
kind
time.
of heart soul destroying. Like,
Yes.
I can't be with you, but I'm going to come back and talk to you.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think Max is going to be a little bit destroyed either way, but honestly, especially with the not knowing who lived and who died from Arcadia Bay, I feel like she is more likely to be happy in the ending with Chloe.
Yes.
Because Chloe is the main person that she cared about in that town. Yes, she cared about the other people. Yes, she was friends with Kate. Yes, she, knew some of the other students and whatever. And yes, Chloe's mom and whatever. But I feel like they could have moved on from that together. And she has Chloe with her, who knows what she's gone through and has gone through a little bit of it with her, to be her support. Whereas in the other one, she's totally alone. No one else knows what she's been through. I mean, unless she chooses to tell them, but still, they wouldn't have lived through it with her the way that Chloe did.
Yeah.
And so she's alone. She has no one who she can really share that with. And to know that you made this choice to sacrifice someone that was so important to you, like, she would just be, I would be destroyed by that. And yeah, I mean, I guess eventually you would process it and say, that's what she wanted, that's what she chose. She didn't want to sacrifice her family and the rest of the town, potentially, for her own life, and, this is how it was meant to be, etc., etc. But in the back of my mind, it would be like, but was it? Because what was the point of me having those abilities if it wasn't to change anything?
Yeah.
And yes, you still changed some things, because it would have changed the entire timeline of where Jefferson was caught. And that affected certain things, but I don't know. It just feels like, I just feel like that's a really, really terrible ending for Max.
Yes.
So
I agree, for Max personally.
yeah. So, and hopefully for your Max, Warren is still alive somewhere, and
Maybe.
they can get together and have little photo science or something.
Yeah. Photochemical children.
Photochemical children. Yep. So, anyway, life is strange. It was good. We've talked for an hour about it, so obviously there was something there.
Yep, I think we've covered most of what we wanted to talk about, which is awesome. So
yeah, I think so. So, I guess that's it. Thanks for listening, guys. Let us know what you thought of the series, if you watched it, which, if you've listened this far, I hope that you have.
Yes. I hope you have too. I don't want to spoil anything for prospective players.
Yeah, definitely. So, thanks for listening, and let us know what you think, and we will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
Bye.